Hold on, I got my cup of coffee over here. Let's see if you can see me. I think I'm too short. I got my cup of coffee over here. Should I pull this down a little bit like this? How about this? Let's see if you can you still see the ocean? Sure. I got my cup of coffee over here. Should I pull this down a little bit like this? How about this?
I got to figure out which one of my things is
Can you still
running.
see the ocean? Sure. I got my cup of coffee over here. Should I pull this down a little bit like this? How about this?
I got to figure out which one of. Yeah, I had to get rid of that. Sorry. Okay, I'll have to trim the beginning of this, I think.
Oh, you're already going live?
Yeah, we're live.
Oh, I didn't know you were live.
Well, that's even better.
I can't see where I am because it's such glaring light.
It's okay. Well, give me a clean start here. And hello, everybody. My name is John Barnwell. I'm here in the north of Detroit area, Detroit, the Straits. And I'm here with my good buddy, Joe Visconti, who is quite a legend, actually, for people in Connecticut, as he's been involved in public service for many years. And he's also studied Rudolf Steiner since he was a young man. I mean, he could tell you that story. But so we have wonderful conversations, and so I like to let people eavesdrop occasionally. So here we are. Joe Visconti, how are you?
Doing good, John. Hopefully I'm centered right. I've got a glaring background in ocean.
You look fine.
Oh, God.
You just could tilt the screen a little bit, maybe. It's
which way, up or down? How about that? Like that?
No, the other way.
Oh, the other way. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, we want to see the boats. There we go. That's perfect.
There we go. Okay.
There's a boat out there or a raft.
Oh, it's a beautiful day here in Niantic, which is East Lyme, Connecticut, about 5 miles from New London. That's a big town. Most people across the country will know New London, Connecticut, and between the Thames and the Connecticut River, where they kind of wash down into the Long Island Sound. Way behind me is Long Island, New York, and it's a gorgeous September day, one day before Michael's Day tomorrow.
Yes, Michaelmas.
Michaelmas, exactly.
As the anthroposophists say. Well, I thought it'd be nice because you've been enthusiastic lately regarding certain ideas that we've discussed. And by the way, great job with Douglas Gabriel the other day, my best buddy. I was with Douglas yesterday. I don't get to see him in person very often because he lives on the other side of the greater metropolitan area, and I don't get around much. But when I do, and we are able to go by the Mayflower Bookshop, visit Robert in there, and talk about anthroposophy or spiritual science. And it's not enough just to approach it on a theoretical level. And I wanted to share with you this brief quote that is very fortifying, I think, especially in the crazy times in which we are living. Rudolf Steiner says, and I'm sorry, I wasn't able to dig up the exact reference on it, so you'll just have to roll with it. He says, "We must eradicate from the soul all fear and terror of what comes towards us out of the future. We must acquire serenity in all feelings and sensations about the future. We must look forward with absolute equanimity to everything that may come. And we must think only that whatever comes is given to us by a world directive full of wisdom. It is part of what we must learn in this age, namely, to live out of pure trust, without any security in existence. Trust in the ever-present help of the spiritual world. Truly nothing else will do if our courage is not to fail us. And let us seek the awakening from within ourselves every morning and evening." End quote. So for obvious reasons, that's one of my favorite quotes.
And that's really good compared to, I should say compared to, but in contrast to what Doug Gabriel was opening the program the other day, him and I were on. It would scare the bejesus out of most people. What is coming? It's almost like nightmares or dreams of the future. They always look worse than they are when you're there. And it sure is going to take trust in the spiritual world, especially since these days where religions are gone, government's gone, the academia, I use the word gone, they're just not trusted anymore. Big tech, science, everywhere we look, there's no place on earth where you get a consensus from these groups that you can rely on them. And it's very, those words from Steiner are really appropriate today.
Yeah, well, it's like Douglas is so fond of repeating, we live in an era of falsehood. And really that's what's at the crux of what's meeting us, because it's gotten to the point to where, because of financial interests, people are saying things that they know isn't true. I mean, that's just so bizarre in my mind. And so it behooves us to be able to try and enter into a relationship with the Christ at critical junctures in time in our history, on any day actually, but it just seems to be that people are more inclined to actually do that when things start to go in crisis mode. And so, but whatever anybody's got to do, by all means. The whole point of the Michael impulse, of which we're right here facing the feast of Michaelmas, which is the feast of Michael, the archangel, who is now the archai or time spirit of the era in which we're living since 1879 in November. And so, but what that represents is developing an individual relationship to Christ that's not dependent on, you can't just look to the bones of the past to be able to solve these riddles for you. You have to be able to come into a relationship with your personal relationship to Kyrios, to the Lord. And that's something that works in us on a subconscious level. And our conscious mind is the least part of the equation.
Yeah.
Although we'd like to think otherwise, and we think we're so clever.
Well,
but if mankind is so clever, how come they have to keep updating their science books every year?
right. Well, the abstract thinking, you could liken to what you're addressing with Michael, thinking as Michael thinks, the cosmic intelligences, to sports. And I think a lot of people will get this if they played any kind of sport. When you're playing basketball, football, hockey, and especially contact sports, when you could be hit. But in that moment that you've prepared and you've drilled and you've seen the coach do all the graphics on the chalkboard, at that moment when it's time to just let that go and act, and the play is, what the play may be, but it may be changed because the quarterback or whoever can't get you the ball. In that moment, everything is thrown out. And in that moment, you're living in the now. You're living in that moment. Your intuition is high, your body, everything. And really, that's anthroposophy is like that. All you still have to let it go and just act positively, forward-thinking, courageous, and trusting that the ball's going to come to you, or you're going to do the task that you're supposed to in life in that game. And the competition is always with the self. So the other side is not necessarily just the evil powers, or it's those parts of our being that would block us, stop us, hinder us from being, from doing our task.
Yes, I mean, when you get closer to it, it really becomes a point to where one realizes that if I don't develop a relationship with Christ while I'm here on earth, why should I expect to find him when I cross the threshold at the end of my life? And that's the thing, is that if you're ashamed of him, he's ashamed of you. That's a tough one.
It's tough, but especially when you see not just the world of politics, but the world we're living in, which is very cynical. And as the religions have faded and they're going into the background, almost like the gods, when the recess of the gods occurred and they pulled away, twilight of the gods, you're saying that with the religious institutions. So the youth are looking at this as though, well, who was Christ? Did he really rise from the dead? Was there really a spiritual body or a physical body? How could I even, with fresh eyes, because many young people aren't brought into religions and there's no connection, and I'm really concerned with them. But the idea of who is Christ, and if he rose from the dead, or even before he came, who is that, and how is this invisible thing? Because they don't see the material Christ. How does this affect me, and how can it help me? Something that's invisible, if it exists, how does it work? And they don't even ask these questions, but these questions are asked on the unconscious level, and they're not answered. So there's just a look the other way, and it never really comes up into their mind about God, Christ, or anything, unless they're having a hard time in Iraq and they're getting shot at, or a life and death situation, when you recognize and realize, if it wasn't Christ, there was something that saved me, something that's protecting me, and you seek that at that moment of death or near death.
Well, it's you could say that they've replaced wonder with fear, and that's a difficult one to grab, because you wouldn't think that there was a equivocal relationship between the two of them, but it is very much so. If you look at the source of fear, Rudolf Steiner is very clear that the modern scientific worldview is a development that arose out of fear. And so you have that idea of wonder. I wonder why the world is this way. I wonder why the world is that way. And so through the abstract, brain-centered framework, they devise ways of interpreting the world based upon their personal experience. But it's interesting, because they come, like Rudolf Steiner says, you should respect the actual facts. It's just the things that they come up with to discuss why that is so and how it works is where it gets kind of dicey, right? Like here's a quote from a really smart guy. Okay, this is Sir William Henry Bragg, and he passed in 1942, but he was an English physicist, chemist, mathematician, and he was also an active sportsman. But he shared a Nobel Prize with his son Lawrence Bragg in 1915, the Nobel Prize in Physics, for their services in the analysis of crystal structure by means of X-rays. But Sir William Henry Bragg said, the important thing in science is not so much to obtain new facts as to discover new ways of thinking about them. And that basically, that sums it up right there. And that's the point I keep trying to make with people, is like, don't close the file. You probably don't have all the information in your file yet, and so don't close the file and assume, I figured that out, because that's when the troubles begin. When you start to think that there's this closed set that you're working with, and you understand all the variables that are involved, and therefore this is what's going to happen. And relationship isn't necessarily indicative of cause. And so there's these indeterminate events in life that can intercede, and that's basically is built on that divine trust.
Well, the closing of the mind, as you're speaking about with these concepts, is also, you'll find that in Steiner's exercises, where he asks people to dwell on an object and to think about it for 5 minutes a day, one of the 5 or 6 exercises. And the next day, the third day, the fourth day, it becomes harder and harder to think only on that and bring new things out. So the fear that comes over people when they want to close it quickly, and I've got it all, I've gathered it all, I know it all, close it, let's not talk about it. There's a fear based on that because it takes courage and bravery and trust to be able to think there's more. And you'd have to open up your being to the possibilities that everything you know is true in one aspect, but like all truth, there's more completeness to it the more you try to delve. And as we get older, we've all noticed that with age that we look at things much different, a lot longer than we were younger.
Absolutely. Here's a nice quote that's right within our wheelhouse for today. And this is from 1 Kings chapter 17. This is the King James Version. It says, and I quote, Elijah the Tishbite, who is of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, as the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Get thee hence, and turn thee eastward, and hide thyself by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. And it shall be, thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. So he went and did according unto the word of the Lord, for he went and dwelt by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. And the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning, and bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. And so there you have an objective lesson of Elijah having absolute faith in the Lord. And I don't expect that necessarily everybody's going to be able to accommodate it as intently as him, but that's pointing in a direction. Yes, it's pointing to the fact that the future comes toward you just as if you look behind you, you have the mirror of the etheric behind you. So you have that past and future and that relationship. And by developing what we like to refer to as a cosmology, that is developing the Christ language so that you understand when I say that old Saturn, old Sun, and old Moon are the 3 previous incarnations of the earth, and we're in the 4th incarnation of the earth, and we're in the human realm, and that in the metamorphosis that is the occult science is really a key for the deeper levels of being able to penetrate into scripture. And so I remember you telling me an interesting story about you asking a priest about Rudolf Steiner's books in the library. Do you remember that?
Yes. And the priest that we knew well knew all about it. Actually, my mother discovered Steiner's books in the Hartford Seminary in Hartford, Connecticut, and where the priests would go in, and this our local priest said to my mom, I remember hearing it, that they knew all about Steiner, but not all the priests at every level. I shouldn't say lower, but the ones that the lay priests at work, they're not totally into it. But it's also something that's the church knows all about, and we were flabbergasted because we were like, why aren't they giving this out? And I believe Rudolf Steiner mentioned that the Catholic Church had waited 400 or 500 years too long to begin to put out the information to the masses. But the church does know, and these things are in the Bible. And I love your quote the other day on a comment on YouTube about Jesus is talking in parables, and that the disciples want to know why. Everyone in the world, for the most part, is capable today to understand these writings and these readings and lectures of Steiner and other great thinkers. But the interest isn't there, but we have the capacity. And it's all about the interest. How, and you can't teach morals according to Plato, and you can't get somebody interested. They'd have to want to. And so I believe there are many more people than we recognize and know, almost like a silent majority, that wonder. When they keep that wonder to themselves, there's nowhere to turn to ask it publicly. Their religions weren't giving it to them. I just think there's just so many people ready to pick up anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner's works, because they do want to know. The public wants to know. I've had some friends tell me that we talk about this once in a while. I do to them, and they're like, "But Joe, you've been doing this 50 years. I'm 55 years old, and I've never, I'm very, smart, this and that, but I can't catch up. How can I know these things? It's another language. It's too late for me." And so, and I've told them, listen, it's not too late to, even the Bible, you may not totally understand, but there are things in here. Don't be disinterested because you think it's too late or there's too much. There's always too much. We could never scratch the surface in our whole life after 50 years studying and meditating and trying. It's the universe. It's been here for a long time. Get what you can get. Take what you can take. Try to work on it and share what you can. Don't get caught up with Ahriman's thinking of you have to close the subject matter, and that's it's not going to really work in your life, and you can't share with people because they don't want to wear religion or God on their sleeve in these days of evil. Don't stop and don't lose interest. Your life after death and your new incarnations depend on you being interested in Christ and what he brings and how he'll do more for us in our future lives than he's even doing now. He becomes much more vital at different levels of the transformation of the human being, and even today.
Yes, Andy says, I share Steiner's work all over Telegram groups. There are so many who have woken up to his work. Yes, and because when it gets to a certain point, if you are on a path of wonder, it's the quest. What on the title.
It's the quest, it's the Holy Grail.
Yeah, I included the Grail in the title because that's really what this is. And if you look at it from a perspective of Rudolf Steiner's work, you'll see that it has to do with that abiding question. Like that for Parsifal, it's whom does the Grail serve? And because when he got to the Grail chapel, the Grail castle, he sees the wounded king, and because he's so caught up in his own personal drama, he doesn't think to ask the king, what ails you, right? And so he's too self-concerned, and that self-concern, that's the Luciferic thing. That's where you're like, you're the big deal, you're the bright light. My light's brighter than yours, therefore, which is ultimately what that can lead, that Shivite destination is the dissolving of your individual nature in the absolute, or at least that's the appearance of it, and that's the terror before the void, and so that's the challenge.
When we also realize
the other challenge that can meet you is the fearful crumbling of Ahriman, that dispersing in granulation.
I was just about to go there with that. We don't know how much we live and serve Lucifer and Ahriman. We don't know how much we're involved in how we need through Christ to disentangle ourselves over time, this life and others, and become conscious of how much. Because once we're conscious of our activity, we then can transform it. But we don't know we're under the spell. We're under so much of their power, and we have been for many, many lifetimes. It's nothing to fear. It's to comprehend and realize that Christ is within us, just waiting to help. And it's up to us to be, I always say it, to be interested. I don't know why I was always interested since I was a little boy, like 4 or 5, my first memories, but so many, my siblings and others didn't have the interest. I don't know why I had it. You can't, there's like love, there's no reason. You can't say, I love you because there's really no reasons. And becauses with love. And it's the same thing with this. There's no becauses. And you can go into the Michael school that we may have been in previous, before we incarnated. That could be there, but no matter what, I'm interested. So many people, I believe, are interested, and they don't know where to turn. And you have to admit, Steiner is heavy. And when you first start reading him out of the blue, it's like, wow, who's this? Where's it? What's this about? Where do I put this? So I think it's the interest, and I think our job, our task as anthroposophists is to capture the imagination to a point that the public can become interested just enough, and then let them go. And they call it a hook in music, you know that, you're a musician, and just hook it enough, fishers of men. Just enough.
Mr. Boston here says, I go through life in wonder and amazement, like Saint Germain. And yes, I mean, really, that was when you look at an individual like the Comte de Saint Germain, I mean, wow. If you I've done extensive studies over his biography over the years, and through the various people that had contact with him over so many years, and the indications of Rudolf Steiner regarding Saint Germain. And so, but there's a lot of what I consider unreliable information out there about him. But then again, it's not my place to try and pull away things that might be inspiring to somebody else. And so somebody
may not your place to fact check the world.
yeah, right. We're not all going to get it all right, and that's okay. It's that the power in you to be able to wonder gives you a capacity that's like a God-given power, but people don't realize that their wonder is a power that they've been given.
This is why Steiner calls
you lose your sense of wonder, your goose is cooked, as they say.
When Steiner renames the philosophy of freedom, the philosophy of spiritual activity, speaks about the fact that it is the activity of seeking, of wanting to know, to try to understand, right or wrong, on the issue, left or right of the aisle. It's not as important as your activity. That's why I'm in politics, but I've always tipped my hat to those who may disagree, because I know they're seeking and they're trying in the soul. They're maybe we're in the time of hate and everything, but the real reality is people really think they're defending what they found and discovered from the position of their heart and how they see it. But it's their activity of being involved. It's their activity of trying. It isn't. We won't be judged on whether we were right or wrong or completely accurate on issues. It is that our soul is engaged and was open to the hierarchies to come in to bring us the things that we ask for.
Yes, and so what I try to do here is give people something to wonder about. I'm not here to provide answers. Hopefully I can, in my quest to improve my questions, in sharing this, perhaps it can help other people improve their questions. And that's my humble goal here. And so if we can do that even a little bit is a lot. If there's a lot of a little bit altogether,
it goes back to how can you measure the spirit? That was from Jesus. The spirit will not be given by measure. We don't know the effect of what we do in other people's lives, just in the mundane world we live in. We don't know how we affect. We don't. It's not, the scientific measure, number, and weight of our men and the world of Maya illusion wants to measure everything, and this is not going to be given by measure. And that's another reason people are afraid of it. How can you? I want to know everything. I read the book. I got it. I got Algebra 1. I know it all. No, you don't. there you won't be able to when you realize that you should be happy with the meal you got today, and don't be worried about tomorrow's meal or the day after. Your daily bread and what you gather, enjoy that, and more will be given if you desire more. And it is very fearful to those who have this abstract thinking that want to just work with concepts in non-tangibles with no experience, no real common sense. But so there's the one hand, there's the public that may be afraid of it because they think they can't get it all because they're too old or they missed it. And then there's the others who think they can't get it all. Some can't think they can get it all one way. Others think that they can't get it all because as they delve into it, they want to close the mind and say, I've got enough, volume one. I've got volume one done. It doesn't work this way. This is the universe. Look at the ocean behind me. Where did this come from? Where did this planet? It's so much and so vast. We should be humble to realize that no matter what we gather, we're just kind of, we're standing up. After 50 years, I feel, in studying Steiner, that I'm standing up in the crib as a 1.5-year-old. And I'm holding on to the crib at this point. I'm not even old enough to get out of the crib. Maybe I'm holding on, pulling myself up. And that's 50 years because it's how it is. But we have many lives and many things, and the Spirit will be given in different measures and ways that will be okay. And you have to have that trust you opened up with. Trust that it will be okay, and enough is enough. And also what Steiner speaks about is too much of this information without the steps in morality. It can be harmful. So be patient and take and receive what is given, and be thankful and grateful.
Yes. And since it came up in the conversation spontaneously, I think I could share with you my translation of an alchemical poem by the Comte Saint-Germain. I translated it out of French.
Here we go.
Curious scrutator of the whole of nature, I have known the great all, its principle and its end. I have seen gold in its power deep within the mine. I have seized its material and surprised its leaven. I explain by what art the soul within the mother's womb makes its home, carries it out, and as a grape seed placed against a grain of wheat under the humid earth, the one plant and the other vine are the bread and wine. Nothing was, God willed, and nothing became something. In my doubting, I sought out that on which the universe is poised. Nothing appeared to sustain the equilibrium or serve as a support. Finally, with the weights of praise and of blame, I weighed the eternal. It called my soul. I died. I adored. I knew nothing more. Yeah, so
one day at a time.
It's that whole idea of leaving yourself open to future possibilities.
Yes.
And that's the real key, because if you go along with Scripture, St. Paul says, "You shall be as the angels." Well, not yet. I'm not ready. And so what do I got to do to meet that goal? And it really has to do with certain moral capacity that becomes a part of oneself. That's the sign of the transformation in the spirit, that you begin to take into account the others around you rather than just be self-involved, like Parsifal before the Grail King, and not asking him, "Brother, what ails you?" It's the saying, the Grail saying is, "Whom does the Grail serve?" And so it's a question.
It also
question.
It's the second commandment of Christ: love your neighbor as yourself. And so, if you loved your neighbor as yourself, you would seek out the help. It's so important. And even if it's one person, if we and this is the problem in our time, that I do believe, I have full faith and belief that the general public, that's what I'll call them, are totally prepared to meet the challenges of the time, and that what they will seek will be given, but not in the old methods and the old ways. I talked to Doug about this. I got my rosaries on, but not in the old ways. The real deeper meaning, those deeper meanings behind the relics and the secrets of religions and times. There's a transformation that's occurring, and we are not aware of it. It's up to us, each one of us. We are the church. The general public is the church, and it's not. And it's very fearsome for many people because they're seeking structure. They're seeking, I bought my ticket, where do I park my car, how do I get in the stadium to see the game, where's my seat number? They're so into that realm, or they go to work and do this, that this type of life is free and intuitive and loving, and it's hard when so much of our life is buttoned down financially, time management, and very few times do people have that free time to wonder. And this is the stress of our time, the pressures of our time, now to allow themselves to, first of all, be prepared to share it. But it does happen in the mundane world with regular people helping each other. So that's important also, whether people can gather the higher knowledge or not. I believe that those who are, we spread it. We are carriers of it. And it works on the collective unconscious. I really believe that. And it's so valuable and important and powerful beyond anything you and I or anyone could know. And you have to have that mindset like Superman. Yes, the power is here. It's much more powerful than we know to be helpful. And yet, usually power has a point. You've got the laser beam or the atomic bomb or something. It hits right here. And in this case, we talked about space with me this morning, space and time. It completely is in a different realm, what we do. And it can't be quantified by measure, number, and weight, which is the times we're living in.
And the great poet of England, Alfred Lord Tennyson, in the Victorian era, wrote his favorite poem of mine is a poem called The Mystic. And it addresses some of the things that we've discussed today. The angels have talked with him and showed him thrones. Ye knew him not, he was not one of ye. Ye scorned him with an undiscerning scorn. You could not read the marvel in his eye, the still serene abstraction. He hath felt the vanities of after and before, albeit his spirit and his secret heart, the stern experiences of converse lives, the linked woes of many a fiery change, had purified and chastened and made free. How could ye know him? You were yet within the narrower circle. He had well nigh reached the last, and with a region of white flame, pure without heat, into a larger air upburning, and an ether of black blue, investeth and engirds all other lives.
Again, poetry, putting into form, putting truth into form that is contrary to the directions or instruction manuals on a machine. It's a living description of what we're speaking about, and even higher, put into art form. And why would that be? Plastic arts, performing arts, written poetry. These are ways that the truth and reality, better, even a better word, can be portrayed to us to contemplate and break us out of the spell that we've been put in by the darker forces in our time. And this is why the arts are so important, and yet they are suffering so much. People aren't interested. The youth are not interested. And I do believe there'll be a great renaissance of the arts, and the new generations will bring it. It'll be something for, and sometimes things have to go away. You know, Elvis makes his comeback in '68. I actually stood on stage with him. I stood on stage with Sinatra as a stagehand in 1976 in his second comeback. So to come back, first you got to go away. And so the arts and some of the things in life that are so precious, as they fade away, class never goes out of style, and the arts will come back. Class in fashion comes back, and it works in rounds and cycles. And Tennyson is fantastic. Shakespeare is another one that's so important. But I believe the youth it'll be foreign and new to them. And so I definitely have hope for the future with the young and young generations. Steiner, this is why he went into Waldorf. He knew it was the future that you'd have to affect and present it. Someday, children that are not maybe children now will hear some of these things, and one thing will connect, just one, and it'll change their world. We don't know what that is, so we're planting seeds we don't know of what.
Yes, you have to be able to think on your feet. And that's that spontaneity. As we move into the future, less and less can we really think that some institution, however venerable, is going to solve all of our problems, and that we can hand off the responsibilities for our lives to great overarching institutions and groups and all of that. That's really really an important part of our past, isn't it? And the future,
institutions, the institutions.
More and more as people look into the future, they want to be able to be left alone and to pursue their own destiny. And that was the promise of America, was that whole idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So it's vitally important at this time with the Michaelic Festival, realizing that that's what that's about. That's about being able to hold back, take your sword and hold back the dragon, Ahriman, and with the other hand, you can reach back and press back Lucifer out of your thinking so that you can find that thinking heart. Because until you get past limiting your thinking to your brain thinking, you can't really open up yourself experientially as much. And it's that real voice of conscience, the still small voice that St. John talks about, that's something that over time you realize it really is in your heart.
Yes. And another thing that tricks people, like polling with numbers that aren't true and lies. The DNA, we think our talents now and our time all come from a choice in the DNA. Some little cell structure brought us a talent or an ability, which is a lie. Like the brain, these are receptors to help facilitate, but we are not given our talents or our karma or our destiny or the things that come from the spiritual world.
The DNA thing, I mean, that's like saying, remember when you had a TV set and you had like the antenna?
Yeah.
And that's the way they try to describe DNA. It's like trying to describe that, well, your TV set works because all that stuff is inside those two little metal things.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing. It's coming through as an instrument, but it doesn't define us. And this is again the lies. And there's so many. I hate to call them lies, but what they are is they're a materialistic, abstract process to label something, confine it, reduce it, and give it an authority.
Well, I think a good word is aberration.
Yeah, but it's then given an authority, and all other thought lines are ridiculous and conspiracy theorists or aberrations.
Well, that's the real evil that sets in, because it weaponizes that aberration.
Right. And that you're seeing that at every level of not just government, every level of in our lives, of every issue that we deal with, from the food we eat, the cars we drive, the colleges we attend, the subject matter, everything. It has this authority I spoke about the other day, where you don't see the hand of, what authority is this? But you call it science? Wait a minute. science and experts have this created this, 5 out of 7 dentists refer crest. Wait a minute, who's running this show, and how do they get this power with the letters behind their name, and join associations and create an authority? And this is why we're in the time of revolution, perpetual revolution. At every level, we've been in a revolution, but not the way the world thinks. It's bigger and more important. The violence comes out in a different way of a revolution, but the violence is there no less in the destruction of people's minds, their hearts, their lives, drug addiction, abortion, all types of things that are occurring. They're violence. It's war. It is war.
Yes, I think that's very, very evident. And again, going back to what Steiner said, where he says we must eradicate from the soul all fear and terror of what comes toward us out of the future. And so that's key, because when you look at that, you have to understand that there's certain forces that work into our human existence. That there's this, Rudolf Steiner talks about different realms of being, where you have like the realm of the kidneys, which is the realm of fear and doubt, and then you have the liver, which brings in the issues of anger and all of that. And so you have these kind of lower dispensations of your energy, because you don't really have a conscious control over them like you wish you had. It's something that has its own sentience almost. It's like another you that participates in those realms. And what he's talking about is, through working with the methodology of spiritual science, it's possible to come into a harmonious relationship with those levels of your personal being. But it's not something that this little guy, that your day-to-day self, really enforces on it, so much as you discipline the little guy, and it gives a stage by which the Kyrios, the Christ in you that St. Paul referred to, can begin to come forward in a more fruitful way. But you have to be able to come to at least an understanding of moral inspiration, moral imagination, and moral intuition. And the emphasis is on that moral, because it has to do with the others. And that's the distinction between the Christ impulse and other, what you might call escapist paths, because they want to liberate, they want to get out of this world, they want to move along, and we're not done here, according to the esoteric Christian stream, that we have this as an opportunity to be able to have a more bountiful relationship in our relationship to the destiny that's been given to us through Christ. And so that's that Grail impulses, the capacity to receive. And you can work on your capacity to receive. And if you do, Rudolf Steiner was very clear. He said, this is a Christ language, and it gives you a means whereby you can ask questions of Christ. And when you enter into the world of sleep, things can come to you as an inspiration from that realm. And Rudolf Steiner said, to all the years that Haeckel considered Rudolf Steiner to be his protege, and Haeckel's right in there with Charles Darwin and the evolution thing. And Rudolf Steiner says, well, I took the works of Haeckel and all of that was going on. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. And I took it to the spiritual world, and what came out of that is occult science and outline. That's his major work, explaining the cosmology of anthroposophy, Saturn, Sun, Moon, Earth, Jupiter, Venus, Vulcan scheme of things. So you see the great gifts that can arise that can be much more profound than we ever imagined, because they become things that you didn't know you didn't know. It gives you such an enhanced sense of wonder that it makes this. I don't know what I would have done had I not found the work of Rudolf Steiner, because I've had critical impasses in my life, as I'm sure everybody out there goes through these things. But if you have that fortification that you're on a path, and you have a sense of purpose as a result of being a sincere seeker. And it's a humility that arises from it, because you realize, oh, there's so much more to learn. I mean, come on. Just in the work of Rudolf Steiner, over 6,000 lectures, 50 published books and articles, and all.
And they're not like
I've only been working on it 50 years, and I think I'm a fairly competent beginner. It's just, yeah, it's kind of silly.
Yeah, but, and the secrets, the great thing for those who are either beginning in Steiner or have been into it years would agree. I become so excited, not because I learned something, but for me it's, oh my God, that's why. Oh, and it makes it, if you want to know that's why, that's been bothering me. Why is it like this? Why is the sky blue? Why is this like that? And then you're not giving these answers, and you have the questions because it matters. And the world wants it not to matter right now. But it matters more than anything, because if you're not living consciously, as conscious as you can be, seeking to understand the meaning of your life, your vocation, your destiny, your karma, then you're not living in the moment fully, and you can't have life abundantly. And this is what's happening to so many people. They have questions, and they'll turn to drugs, or they'll turn to alcohol, or whatever, to escape, because they can't find it in themselves. And this is why it's so important to realize that Christ is in each of us, and we're there to help Christ in the other, help them.
Well, we're running out of time here, but I thoroughly enjoy. I don't know why we waited so long before we got to this next episode, but that's okay, because we just keep plugging away.
And hopefully you enjoyed the ocean. You can hear the seagulls and the waves behind me. I thought we'd do this.
Very therapeutic. But
thanks for having me, John.
Yeah. And those of you that are interested, I have 2 books. My first book is undergoing reprinting. That's the Arcana of the Grail Angel, the Spiritual Science of the Holy Blood and of the Holy Grail, a study developed out of the work of Rudolf Steiner of the underground streams of esoteric Christianity, which flowed from the Brotherhood of the Holy Grail to the Order of Knights Templar and the True Rosicrucian Order, with text and diagrams, and a foreword by my best buddy, Douglas Gabriel. And in there is an extensive series of diagrams that I crossed my desk many years ago, and by Aaron Pfeiffer, the founder of Biodynamic Gardening, and one of that small group of young individuals that were around Rudolf Steiner. And Rudolf Steiner used to like to drive in a car with Pfeiffer. Pfeiffer would drive him around. It's like, what a wonderful opportunity that is. But so that I called them the Grail diagrams, and I took his diagrams, plus I added a great many more, especially in the second volume. There's way many more that explains all the various facets. So it's a very helpful study tool to help you keep things straight when you study a work as extensive as Rudolf Steiner, and that's the Arcana of Light on the Path. I still have copies of that one.
And I just bought both copies yesterday.
Yeah, he got my very last copy of the Arcana of the Grail Angel. I had no idea, but you were the first one to ask that I had to say sorry. But so you lucked out, but I'm reprinting it, so you people can wait, and that's all well and good. And I also want to be very thankful to my friends that especially those that are recurring. This podcast has been made possible by the generous support of Tyler and Douglas and Vadim and Vivian and a whole host of other people, including Ray and Whitney and James and Marilyn, that have been very, very key for me, and all these other folks that constellate around these endeavors. That's why we're here. It's just this whole idea, if we could just have individuals that are trying to stay conscious rather than sleeping into the insanity that tends to circle the globe. And so with that understanding, I just want to consecrate it a little bit with an old Celtic prayer of St. Patrick. Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ to my left, Christ to my right, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ within me. And thank you so much, Joe, and we'll do it again soon.
Thank you for having me, Joe. God bless you.
And those that want to buy me a cup of coffee, that's paypal.me/John Barnwell 888. And no amount's too small. And thank you all so much. And you enjoy the beach there. I'm jealous.